So, today I wanted to talk about 20 signs of complex PTSD. And the value of understanding these signs is if you don't know you have it, then you don't know how to work through it. And I say that because that was the case with myself when I first was really in the grips of my healing journey. And I remember a friend of mine saying, Michelle, you're so detached. I think you might have PTSD. And when she said that, it didn't resonate with me because to me, what I understood for PTSD was somebody that underwent one huge traumatic event. And that didn't resonate with me because I didn't go through this one big, huge thing. And that's the thing with complex trauma. So that's why I put these signs together, because once I understood what I had, what was going on, I could then begin to work through it. So that being said, let's dive into the symptom. Okay, my friends, this is me interrupting me because I want you to know of a valuable resource that is helpful when you're healing from emotional trauma. Transformational healing begins when we start putting the focus on these wounded pieces of us that are inside. Today is July 11th, 2024. From now until the end of this month, I'm offering a year membership in the School of Transformation. So if you think this is a resource that could be helpful for you, make sure you join before the sale ends, the last day of June 2024. Number one is you find yourself feeling emotionally triggered, which means you have these reactions to things that are far greater than the current circumstance warrants. So somebody does something that upsets you, but instead of being upset at a level that makes sense, you fly off the handle. And so you find that you never know when you're going to be triggered. You may not even know exactly what all of your triggers are. You just know that there are certain people, places, and things that can touch something in your soul that cause you to react in a way that you wish you hadn't. Number two is a harsh inner dialogue. So if you paused and actually listened to the way you treat yourself, especially when you make a mistake, or especially when you aren't being your best, or what you would consider, I should say, your best self, how you talk to yourself at those times will let you know if you have that harsh inner critic. Number three is toxic shame, which means there is this underlying core belief that I am bad, I am defective, I am worthless, and there is something wrong with me. It's not I did something bad, but I am bad. And people that often have toxic shame feel like they don't want to take up space. They feel guilty for breathing. They feel guilty for being alive. And they have an almost disgust emotion or felt sense towards their very being. Number four is self-abandonment, which means when you are going through different things, rather than working through your emotions, you abandon yourself. You don't support yourself when you're down. You probably kick yourself when you're down with that harsh inner critic. You wind up getting busy and doing things instead of dealing with your emotions. So you've never learned how to have emotional support from within because it was never modeled to you, especially if you underwent childhood trauma. Number five is social anxiety. Again, if you have toxic shame and you feel like there's something wrong with you, it's going to be really hard to be able to show up in social situations feeling confident and calm and grounded in self. Number six is chronic health issues. You might have migraines, headaches, gastrointestinal issues, asthma, fibromyalgia. The reality is that trauma gets stuck in the body and it shows up as dis-ease. Number seven is chronic mental health issues. You might have depression and anxiety or swing from one to the other or struggle with things like OCD. Number eight is addictions. Two emotions that really drive addictions are shame and guilt. And if you had childhood trauma, if you had a parent that had a personality disorder, then those emotions, toxic shame, makes up your core identity. And so if that is your core identity, it is extremely painful for a child to work through that emotion, so they don't. So what happens is the brain stores that trauma in the limbic network and it kind of closes the door to it. So the child doesn't see it. The child can continue to grow without having to deal with that amount of shame all the time. What happens when we're an adult and the pieces of the trauma that were suppressed and repressed start coming up. And because it's so overwhelming, we often turn towards addictions as a way to cope, as a way to avoid feeling those intense feelings of shame. And so it's like we're trying to regulate our emotions with the addiction. So we don't feel it, we're going to do this. Number 9 is hypervigilance. When you've been through chronic stress and you have complex PTSD, you never feel safe. And so your nervous system is like this scanner that's looking all the time for danger. And you can often see it in people's eyes. So, for example, when I first started on YouTube, I was still surviving. Basically, I was still a mess, to put it nicely. And you can watch some of my videos and you'll see my eyes kind of dart a little bit. And people would comment, they're like, why do your eyes go like that? Why are your eyes always like doing that? And the reality was because I had Cptsd and my brain was constantly scanning for danger. And so sometimes I have clients and I can see that in them too. And their eyes are going all the time because their nervous system is hyper vigilant to danger. In an effort to try to keep you safe, the nervous system never got to rest. And so it's like it got stuck in the on position. Number 10 is dissociation. You might find that you feel disconnected from yourself. It's like watching your life as a movie where you see yourself doing things, but you don't really fully feel present. You might feel numb. You might have a hard time knowing how you feel when people ask. You might be able to tell everyone what they're feeling. You might be able to notice and be that empathic to see what they're feeling. But when it comes to you, you might have no idea what you are feeling. Number 11 is you might have memory issues. You might have difficulty concentrating, difficulty learning, difficulty making decisions. And the reason is that when you have CPTSD, you spend more of your time in an area known as the limbic network and less of the time in your prefrontal cortex, which is where your thinking, your logic, your reasoning is. And so just like a muscle, when you don't use a muscle for a long time, it atrophies, and the muscles you do use get stronger. Are the areas in our brain, like our amygdala, the areas in our limbic network, I should say, like our amygdala, wind up enlarging because we're always in that area of our brain, and our hippocampus, which is necessary for memory, which is necessary for short-term memory and learning, actually shrinks. Number 12, you might define yourself as a perfectionist. So if you underwent covert childhood trauma and you were always made to feel like nothing you did was right, in an effort to try to control, in an effort to try to make yourself safe, you won't even do things unless you feel you can do them perfectly. Number 13 is you might have a harsh outer critic where you view people as either too awful or too dangerous to trust. And number 14 is being stuck in a trauma response. You find yourself, rather than having personality traits, you have trauma responses. You're either fighting, fleeing, doing, and being so busy so that you don't have to stop and feel. Freezing, where you want to do something, it's like one foot on the gas, but one foot on the brake. So a lot of energy is being dispersed and you're not getting anywhere. Or fawning, which is people pleasing, sacrificing self to try to keep yourself safe, which leads me into 15, which is having an unclear self-identity. It's like you don't know who you are because you are always trying to be whatever you need to be safe. And so you're a chameleon and you change shape, and you're a shapeshifter and a people pleaser, again, with the goal of trying to ensure that you're safe. Number 16 is you have emotional flashbacks, where you may not have a memory of a past event, but an emotion from the past gets kicked on in the present. And it's as if you have regressed to a younger state of mind. In fact, a lot of people, when they're having emotional flashbacks, say, I felt like a child. I felt scared of being bad or getting in trouble like a child would feel because they were experiencing an emotional flashback. 17 is similar to one I just mentioned, which is people pleasing, where you don't really show up as your true self because there's this underlying belief: if they know who I really am, they will leave and abandon me, or I will get in trouble, or it's bad or unsafe to be me. So authenticity is something that your inner self avoids like the plague. 18 is a lack of boundaries. If you had narcissistic parents in childhood, there were no boundaries. And so you don't even know what healthy boundaries looks like. You don't know how to enforce boundaries. You don't even realize that you're allowed to have them. Number 19 is a fear of people being angry or upset. So you might find yourself when somebody is angry or upset, it really affects you. It really rocks you on the inside and causes you to feel a huge amount of discomfort. You might even give in to whatever people are asking because of this fear of making them upset. And number 20 is pathological loneliness. So there's a difference between being alone and feeling an intense amount of suffering when you're alone. And pathological loneliness happens because you didn't have the connections you needed in childhood to help you to feel safe with people. You didn't have the connections that helped you to learn how to see yourself. Connections outside of self weren't safe. And so because you didn't have those examples, you weren't able to internalize an inner connection. We learn how to treat ourselves by how we're treated by other people. And so if we were abandoned by other people, we abandon ourselves. And as a result, there's a tremendous amount of loneliness that creates so much pain. It's almost like the child self or our inner child that needed somebody that was alone dealing with things that that child should never have dealt with. That child is still feeling the pain of that loneliness because those pieces of us that are still there, thanks to cell memory, it's a thing, right? Our inner child is still there, didn't have someone outside to help him or her, and we didn't learn how to be there. So we don't have anyone outside of us, and we don't even have ourselves until we start learning how to heal and work through complex PTSD. So those are just 20 signs to help you to start self-reflecting to see where you're at. And if you've been on this journey for a while, something that I like to do in Thrivers is have people think of where they were a year ago. Because let's say you said yes and identified with 16 of them. And that might sound like a lot. But if you look back a year ago, you might have identified with all 20. So we want to start noticing and celebrating those shifts forward. Okay, so make sure you do that if you've been on this journey for a while. And if this is your starting point, just notice where you're at with compassion and kindness. Kicking yourself for where you're at is only going to prolong your journey, but accepting yourself for where you're at and starting to learn how to support yourself on this journey is going to help you to move forward. And if you're struggling and you feel like doing this work alone is just too hard, make sure you check out Thriver School of Transformation because we meet live on Zoom. So it's not a video course that you get. We literally meet live on Zoom. Each month we take a different piece of the recovery journey. We work through it together. So be sure to check out that link. I'll leave it there for you.